Hey, Mike here from Muscle for Life and Legion Athletics. And in this video podcast, we're going to talk about sugar and dieting. Is a low sugar diet necessary for weight loss or even better for weight loss? Now, if there's one thing that mainstream health and diet gurus agree on, it is just how heinous the sugar molecule is. But then you have some glitches in the matrix, like Professor Mark Haub, who lost 27 pounds on a convenience store diet of protein shakes and Hostess and Little Debbie snacks, sugary cereals and Oreos, and the teacher John Cisna, who lost 56 pounds, I think it was, eating nothing but McDonald's for 6 months. As well as studies that have found absolutely no difference whatsoever in terms of weight loss between low sugar and high sugar diets. So what does that mean? What are we supposed to take away from that? Well, in the spirit of keeping this video short and sweet, pun intended, I want to give you the bottom line and then explain a little bit of why that's true. So the bottom line is the amount of sugar that you eat has no direct impact on weight loss. You can lose as much weight as you want, eating as much sugar as you want. Now, I'm not saying you should do that, but you can. You see, so long as you know how to manage your energy balance properly, so long as you know how to manage your calories in versus calories out, you can lose weight regardless of what you eat, whether it's sugary foods or fatty foods or highly processed, just junk foods. None of that matters in the context of weight loss if you are managing your energy balance properly. Now, if you're not sure what I mean by energy balance, just click the link up here to read an article I wrote on it. Now, our goal should never be just to lose weight, though. Of course, we want to lose fat and not muscle, and depending on where we're at in our personal fitness journey, so to speak, we may even want to lose fat and gain muscle at the same time, which is possible when you are new to resistance training. And when that's the goal, you have to go beyond just calories in, calories out. When that's the goal, you have to also pay attention to how those calories break down in terms of protein, carbohydrate, and fat, in terms of macronutrients. Now, if you do that, if you manage your calories and your macros properly, you can greatly improve your body composition while still eating a lot of sugar. Again, it's not something I recommend, but you can do it. And so why do I not recommend just eating a bunch of sugar? Well, first, studies show that the more sugar you eat, the higher your risk of developing micronutrient deficiencies, because of course, most of the sugar that people eat comes from highly processed, just nutritionally bankrupt foods. Unfortunately, most people are not sugaring their salads or their vegetable medleys at dinner. And another reason why you don't want to be eating too much sugar too often is it can have other unwanted physiological effects. For example, you will often find in people who have high sugar diets, even who are very physically active and whose diets are otherwise decent, if you add high sugar intake, you will often find that triglyceride levels are also quite high. So anyway, the real practical takeaway here is to manage your energy balance properly, manage your macronutrient balance properly, manage your micronutrient balance properly, which is easy. Just make sure that you're getting 80+% of your daily calories from relatively unprocessed foods that you cook yourself, which are primarily going to be probably plant-based foods. Sure, you're going to have some protein from animal foods. You might have some lean meats. You might have some dairy. But if you're doing it right, most of your carbs should be coming from relatively unprocessed plant foods. And you should also be getting some quote unquote healthy fats in there. Of course, you need some saturated fat, but you should also be making sure that you are getting unsaturated fat in your diet, particularly monounsaturated fat. So my favorite sources of monounsaturated fat are nuts. These days I like walnuts and avocado. And you can also get polyunsaturated fats from oils. Like I cook my dinner in some olive oil, so there's some polyunsaturated. I eat some avocado and some nuts every day for some monounsaturated. And for my saturated fat, there's the nuts and the meat that I eat, which is usually, these days, it's ground turkey or chicken, and also some red meat here and there. Okay, so now let's talk about how that works. How can that be true in light of how many mainstream experts and gurus say otherwise? How many of them say that sugar is the reason why so many people are fat, and if you don't completely cut sugar out of your diet, you will never have the body you really want? Well, for that, we should start at the top and define what sugar is, because these days it's kind of a vague term that encompasses all kinds of things ranging from fruit to honey to candy. Well, sugars are molecules that are comprised of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and therefore they are, of course, forms of carbohydrate, and they break down into three forms. You have monosaccharides, oligosaccharides, and polysaccharides. Now, I don't want to go too far into the chemistry here because I want to keep this video short. So what you need to know is that monosaccharides are also called simple sugars. So for example, glucose is a monosaccharide. Glucose is also referred to as blood sugar. Fructose is a monosaccharide, which is found, of course, in fruit and high fructose corn syrup. And glucose and fructose are in table sugar, of course, sucrose. So these are the simple sugars, monosaccharides. Next are oligosaccharides, which are simply several monosaccharides bound together. Oligo is Greek for a few, and saccharide is Greek for sugar, so you have a few sugars. Now, you find oligosaccharides in many of the whole grains and the legumes and the fruits and vegetables that we eat. And last, we have the polysaccharide, which is the most complex form of sugar in our diet. It's comprised of 10 or more monosaccharides bound together in a chain. And two examples of sources of polysaccharides in our diets are starch, and starch is simply an energy store for plants, as well as cellulose, which is a natural fiber found in plants. Now, a key thing to understand here is whether we are talking monosaccharides, simple sugars, including table sugar, or more complex sugars, like the sugars found in fruits and vegetables, they all end up as glucose in the end. And what I mean is, that's what your body does. Metabolically, it breaks all carbohydrates ultimately down into glucose, which of course is then shipped off for use. So your brain needs a lot of glucose. Your brain really likes glucose. It prefers to run on glucose. Your muscles use glucose. Your organs use glucose. And regardless of how complex the sugar is when it goes into your mouth, in the end, it's turned into glucose. So in this way, the carbohydrate, the sugars in broccoli are similar to the carbohydrate or the sugars in a candy bar. Both end up as glucose. The difference, though, is the rate at which this happens. Simpler sugars are, of course, processed faster than more complex sugars. Now, some people say that's the key. They say that the glycemic index or the glycemic load is very important when it comes to weight loss, that you want low glycemic index, low glycemic load foods to maximize weight loss. Again, that is completely false. I don't want to go off on that tangent here because it'll make the video too long, but if you want to learn more about that specifically, just click that link and you will be taken to an article I wrote on it. What you need to know, though, is it is basically impossible to avoid sugars altogether. You eat a vegetable, it contains sugars. The only way to really cut sugar completely out of your diet in all its forms would be to do something like following a ketogenic diet. Now, as far as weight loss goes, as I mentioned earlier, how much sugar you eat has no direct impact on it. Physiologically speaking, it does not matter. Now, functionally speaking, I'd say it does matter because if you're cutting and you're eating a lot of sugar, you're probably eating a lot of foods that aren't that filling, at least for the calories, which are going to be restricted. You're already tight on calories. And if you're eating foods that contain a lot of sugar, they probably also contain a fair amount of fat. So they're very calorically dense. They're not very filling, so that means that you are going to have a harder time of it. If you're eating a lot of sugar when you're cutting, you're probably also going to be a lot hungrier than you need to be. You're going to have more cravings than are necessary, and you're probably not going to feel that great, especially if your cut is going to take a while because, again, most foods that contain sugar are also pretty weak nutritionally. And as I mentioned earlier, this has been shown again and again in various studies. For example, one study conducted by scientists at Duke University found no difference in weight loss between subjects who were getting 4% of their daily calories from sugar, and that's table sugar, and 43%. Now think about that for a second. 43% of your daily calories from sucrose? That's hard to do. 1 gram of sucrose contains 4 calories. So let's say you're eating 2,000 calories a day. So you're looking at approximately 850 or 860 calories from sugar, which then of course breaks down into like 200 plus grams of sucrose a day. That's hard to do. You cannot get more high sugar than that. Another study worth reviewing was conducted by scientists at Maastricht University, and they found that so long as protein and fiber were kept equal, there was no difference in weight loss or body composition between people who ate a low sugar and a high sugar diet. So how much sugar should you be eating when you're cutting? Well, the simple answer is eat as much or as little as you'd like to eat. And if you really want to do it right, then eat a high protein diet. Make sure that you're getting somewhere around 0.8 grams to maybe 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. Or if you are very overweight, set protein to about 40% of your daily calories. Make sure that you're eating a good amount of carbs. I like to start with about 2 to 2.5 grams per pound of body weight per day. Get the majority of your daily calories, 80+%, from relatively unprocessed, highly nutritious foods, stuff you have to prepare yourself. A lot of plant foods, colorful fruits, colorful vegetables. Make sure you have some dark leafy greens in there. And then you can play with your final 20% or maybe 10% of calories and use those for whatever you want. Use those for sugary foods. Enjoy yourself. If you just do that, you will never struggle to lose weight, period. One other tip is don't drink your calories, especially when you're cutting. Drinking calories in general is a bad idea unless you are trying to bulk and you need to eat a lot. So if you're one of the 170 pound-ish guys that I've emailed with many, many times, 150 to 170 pounds, who need to eat upward of 4,000 plus calories per day to gain weight, then yeah, I understand, let's say, drinking maybe not a gallon of milk a day, that's a bit excessive, but drinking calories. And milk is particularly good for drinking calories. But if you're cutting, do not drink calories, do not drink soda, do not drink sports drinks, do not drink fruit juice. And the reason for this is those beverages often contain a lot of calories, like a cup of orange juice, I think is about 100 calories, and they do not trigger satiety like food. So what can happen is you can drink hundreds of calories and be hungry an hour later. But if you were to have eaten those calories, and especially if you were to eat in a meal that contains like a good mixed meal, some protein, some carbs, some fat, some fiber, in the same amount of calories, that might keep you full for 3, 4, 5 hours. I also recommend that you eat fruit instead of random sugary snacks. So if it's the afternoon and your energy is dipping and you need a pick-me-up, instead of going for the candy, go for some fruit instead. For example, check out strawberries. Check out the calories in strawberries. Check out how much you can eat for just 100 calories. And speaking of fruit, eat fruit instead of drinking fruit juice. Much better. Much better to eat an apple, which is going to fill you up, and it's going to give you good prebiotic fiber, and it's going to give you various micronutrients. Much better to do that than drinking the equivalents in calories in apple juice. And my last little tip here is to buy low sugar or sugar-free prepackaged foods. If you're buying prepackaged foods, you might be surprised how much sugar is packed into stuff like yogurt, jam, dairy and dairy alternatives, salad dressings, applesauce, oatmeal, and the like. Basically, if it comes in a jar or a can or a container or a tub, check that ingredients label before buying it because it may contain more sugar than you realize. And remember that added sugar can go by many names. For example, you have molasses, you have cane sugar, you have fruit juice concentrate, malt sugar, corn syrup, honey, syrup, and words ending in oses, right? So you have dextrose, lactose, maltose, fructose, glucose, and of course sucrose, which is table sugar. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you found it helpful, and if you did, please do give it a like and drop a comment down below letting me know what you thought. And if you have any personal experiences to share with sugar intake and weight loss in particular, or weight gain, please do share that as well. I would like to hear from you. And lastly, but not leastly, please do click the red subscribe button over there if you like my stuff and you want to make me happy, and then click the little bell next to it and YouTube will notify you when my next video goes live. Thank you, and I will see you in the next video.